Welcome to Writer Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode's topic, get into character motivations. I'm Russ Capasso, and joining me as always, Tim Letney. Tim, what's your motivation this morning?
My motivation is to not let you down with how little research I've done about this topic.
Oh, man. We're getting into goals and motivation here. And the goal was I wanted you to come prepared for this.
I mean, I'm prepared with my own stories and with, my personal characters that needed some refinement with their motivations.
That's which you're kind of in the middle of doing right now, right?
Yes, I'm in the middle of kind of cleaning them up.
Yeah. So no, I think this will be this. I'm excited about this one because I'm getting back into working on next book and starting all over. And this is where you begin. Well, do we want to motivation and goals? I mean, I guess there's motivations we're talking about, but kind of separation, because I think a lot of times motivation and goals kind of get intermingled.
Yeah. What's the difference between the two?
I think really, to boil it down, to keep it real simple, the motivation is like the why someone's doing something, and the goal is what they actually want, right? So like an example would be like protagonist he wants to solve a murder. That's his goal, right? But his motivation might be, why is it important to him? Maybe it's because he wants to make a name for himself, or, it's revenge or justice or something like that, right? So that's a real dirty, simple definitions.
So if it was John Wick, his goal would be
to kill everyone.
And his motivation would be because they killed his puppy that symbolized his dead wife.
That's it.
So revenge.
That's pretty simple. He's pretty straightforward. It's not too crazy.
Do you think you can have multiple goals?
I think you can have, I think you can have multiple goals. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of a story that would have that, but I think you can have multiple goals. It might get a little confusing for the reader, because then you're like, well, what are they actually doing?
Or maybe one goal that has multiple motivations. I think that might be where I'm getting a little wonky on mine.
Well, that also, you could, but then again, you start maybe potentially confusing the reader and like, what's their, the idea for it, right, is that, the key for having good motivation is like, that's drives kind of character development and their growth throughout the story, right? So if you have multiple motivations, where are they going? How are they changing?
But where you start with your character, right, in the beginning, their initial goals and initial motivations could potentially change because they're kind of a broken version of themselves. They haven't kind of gone through that metamorphosis yet, where they're not getting what they need. They're not doing what they should be. They're kind of making their story worse until they're on that track.
Yeah, I think you could probably mix and match things. There's mix and match, like your motivation versus like maybe the wrong goal, and then the goal shifts, as you get halfway through the story, and like the character realizes that maybe my motivation or what I thought I wanted is changing based on what I think I needed. Mm-hmm. It might be a little murky water, because then you like, do you start confusing the reader unless it's pretty clear transition, right? From one motivation to another.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I am, because I think one of my character motivations early on for my main is like living a life of like authenticity and perhaps like individuality. But the real goal is like a companionship, family, acceptance goal. At the end, like,
you mean motivation is to have?
Yeah, I mean motivation. Sorry, yeah.
I guess the other key for the motivation is it's kind of key for conflict too. So if you're changing those throughout, does that come natural? So like that change, and maybe their motivation through midway through the story, is that the conflict now all of a sudden makes sense. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I was looking through all my characters for this, and I went through like the 4 main characters. I guess my 2 mains and my kind of 2 supporting characters are there. I don't think I initially did this. And like my main character, Elliot, he had nothing. Like he had a goal, like, seek the truth, right? About this mysterious signal, right? And that's okay. That's a pretty straightforward goal. But I was like, he has no motivation. And that's why like the first couple of drafts of him was just so boring and just a stick figure. And we've talked about that. And it wasn't until like the 4th or 5th draft where I found his motivation, and that was with his father, like having that closure with his father who's passed away, and that final connection, right? And completing something his father had started. And I was like, there we go. That's it. Now that's his motivation. And then that kind of influences all his decisions he's going to make towards like solving this problem. Yeah. That's what it was like, light bulb, storytelling light bulb went off,
So before you put pen to pad, did you have goals and motivations for all your characters pre-planned?
No. Which is not a good idea, which is going to save me a lot of time and effort, I think, especially in the revision process and even just the first draft. So Elliot, I did not. He had a goal, and that was it. And I had no real motivation for him. So he, like I said, it was just like this flat character, which sometimes fine as long as the other characters around him have some type of motivation and going on, right?
Yeah.
Lilo, of course, she was the only one I had the most fleshed out, which everyone realized. And like, I had goals for her. I had motivations for her. And it's interesting for her in Host, as it relates to Host, is going to be different for her motivations and goals in like her next 2 books, which are going to be kind of like a arc with Host in the middle. Like, in this, it was like very clear, like, yeah, she's just trying to figure out who's following her and who's leveraging her to do these, create this.
Doesn't she have a bit of a revenge subplot? No,
not in this. Not here. This is her motivation is to survive. Like that's her motivation. But I'm going to expand on that, and obviously it's going to change for her other stories, like what she's actually doing. But yeah, I mean, she was the only one I had like, I know what her motivation is, and it drives all of her decision making. It drives everything she's doing. Even if it's like the wrong decision, but she knows she needs to do it. It's like, oh, this just feels natural, which is, I think, important because readers can connect with the motivation. It justifies the reasoning and behind like characters' behavior and like their action in a particular scene, where like every decision she makes in every scene, I just drove it back to the motivation, which, it just makes for like a more believable like story and things moving along. So how did you start out? Did you have any goals and motivations like kind of outlined before you started? I know you're kind of going through like quite a revamp on a lot of characters, but did you have some sense?
I did, kind of based on, you had sent me that kind of organizing structure of the snowflake method. And I believe that had like one of the bullets, on that tool was characters and character motivation.
Yeah.
So I had them set up for most of my characters, but I'll say like, as I was finding the story, and that's a problem, right? Like I outlined through like broad tent poles, but there's a lot of moments where I was steering my characters, and to get them to these different moments that I had outlined, I think they behaved in a way that wasn't in line with the initial motivation that I'd set up.
Yeah.
And beta readers, I think, kind of came across that. And I heard from 3 beta readers, they were like, this is cool, I like it, but, look at the character motivations for these 2 people in particular. And it was my main and one of my antagonists, actually. And for me, I was like, oh, well, it's murky. And obviously it can't be. It shouldn't be murky. I think it's okay for them to have doubt, but there should be something for the reader to kind of latch onto. So right now, during this editing process, I'm doing my best to refine these motivations.
Yeah.
Because they do change. Like I said it before, like my character in the beginning is very different from my character at the end. So I'd say that their initial goals in Act 1 are very different from their goals in Act 3, but they're certainly connected.
Yeah,
right?
But their motivation was always the same. But them as a character, like their flaw is what's changed, right? So it's not necessarily that their motivation changed. Like I'm backpedaling on the opening conversation we had. So it's like their motivation might be your main character might want to just be accepted into the world and have a family, or maybe not realize that, right? But that's that's kind of like in the start, and then her flaw might be the way she's treating her family or friends
about it,
right?
Yep. That's exactly what it was, right? Yeah. So, but you're right. The motivation itself is the same.
Yeah.
But the way that she's going about, like her goals change, like how she's going to get there changes, like she's trying to satisfy that need in the wrong ways, really, until the end.
Yeah.
But, as I kind of scroll through, like, and I'm sure you'll share this, on the feed, but you shared this kind of bulleted list, or this big list of different types of character motivations on one of the, I think it was from One Stop Writers. As I'm looking at this like huge list of all these different goals, or all these different motivations, I think I could probably like checkbox this like a sushi menu. Like I do feel like she sometimes hits multiple iterations of these goals. So that's probably wrong, right? It probably needs to be refined a little further.
Yeah, I think like having the single motivation is what's, I think that's key for people getting pulled in, and then having multiple goals, or having those goals change to recognize, how they're to reflect their flaw, right?
I've got like what is essentially like a giant kind of creature feature-y type story.
Yep.
And the character's motivation is, kind of acceptance and, companionship.
Mm-hmm.
But inside of this creature features type story, another one of their motivations is survival,
Yep.
right? Like it's not just survival. And to me, that would be a boring story.
Yeah.
But I think that it could be like, I think a sub motivation to the big one, right? Like they need to survive in order to get to the bigger goal that they're kind of pushing towards. And it's super common, right? Like it's, the companionship one is like, I mean, I bet you could probably say the same thing about like Goonies, where there's like these sub goals and there's our overarching goals.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, not goals, motivation.
I would even say my character Lila, like her motivation is to just survive, but I think it's also trying to trust people, like open up to people and trust, but she can't, right? But her surviving is her not trusting people. So they kind of meld together in a way, right? Where it's like they're tied, they're kind of hand to hand, I would say. So I guess that's where you can kind of mash them together, and if they kind of connect in that way, then people can kind of understand like all the decision that character would be making, and maybe why they're tied. So, and
then I really refined one of my kind of antagonists' motivations, like a ton, and that was what I'd heard before too, is that like his motivations, and I think it's because I was finding the character as I was going, and I didn't want them to be all one thing. I wanted there to be some kind of empathy with this character.
Yep.
But I've gone back and just kind of refined it into this like power leadership kind of goal. So like what they do is always informed by that. Like their motivation is to continue to gain more power, to, have more sway, have more influence. Yeah. And I still wanted to maintain some nuance in that character so they weren't despicable, but I did need to really hone in and kind of make that a thread. And now I do feel pretty strongly that it's a thread from the beginning all the way to the end. Same thing with Judy. I feel like that's becoming much more honed. It feels like a guitar string, and sometimes it wavers, but it's always, connected at the end.
I think it's kind of interesting because I'm thinking about another character. I have the FBI agent Blackwell. And it's kind of interesting. I didn't really, again, he was another one. He was very two-dimensional, I think, to start, and I kind of gave him a little more weight later on, but early drafts, some people have said, "Oh, I liked how neutral he is," and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't really mean that." I kind of meant that, but not really. I meant for that to happen, but I didn't put a lot of thought into making it happen.
Wasn't your impetus for doing that to like keep the reader guessing about where their allegiances lied?
Yes. So and that's interesting because like his motivation, I think, at the end, his actual motivation, I think at the end changes. Then it changes his character. So there's a lot of things that are connected there, but that just sets him up as, okay, he's got maybe another story where he's going off and now he's got a new view of the world. Not to give spoilers, but it's the journey to get there, and his motivation like really was, he's a former military guy and he's kind of by the book, and he's a Boy Scout, and he's, his motivation is his quote unquote duty to to country and protect it. Right. And I think his motivation and his core gets shook by the end of the story. That's what kind of changes maybe his goals and shifts his motivation to maybe color outside the lines a little bit, so to speak. So that was kind of fun to write. And there's another thing I like early on, which I'm now excited because I started outlining characters for the next, couple of books I'm just toying around with. And I think one of the important things is that you and I have probably both learned is making sure that your antagonist has like a flushed out worldview and motivations and goals of their own. I definitely struggled with that in this first book, and now I'm like excited to write an antagonist. But I think it's kind of a key thing too, is making sure everyone has a motivation, no matter how unlikable the character are. Right.
I'm on this resource now, and it's I think it's kind of echoing a little bit of what I'm feeling about multiple motivations, and not that your character should have a ton of motivations, but this resource, it's like jerryjenkins.com, is breaking it up between internal motivations. So that's like the power revenge one, and then external motivations, like, survival, competition. And then on one of the bullets, they're saying it's okay to mix and match internal and external. Like it makes it a little more nuanced. So maybe you shouldn't have two internal and you shouldn't have two external. But you could have an internal and an external just to make sure that it's nuanced, as life is life is complicated. And that might be what I'm feeling a little bit, is that I'm writing about a teenager. So in my brain, at least when I was a teenager, it was this swirling mess And I know that's not fun to read, but in real life, being a teenager is really complicated. And, you were pulled in a lot of different directions and your motivations kind of move because you're trying to self-actualize in a way that your brain just isn't, no offense to any teenager listening, but your brain's not ready to do it until you're in your mid-20s. Like,
it's a safe life.
You're just in this formative stage of life. So I want to be careful, not to make my character feel like a 40-year-old.
But now it's like, of course, now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh, actually, outside of Elliot, he's only got one motivation.
No, I think Elliot's got an internal and external. I think the internal one is the father relationship. Yeah. Because that is not his external motivation.
No.
He never talks about it.
No. That's definitely his internal. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's a focus. Like, that's the main one. If there's another one, which sure. I mean, what do you think it is?
I mean, you're dealing with like large scale cyber type attacks. Mm-hmm. So the threat is big. So there is.
Yeah.
He's not leading. It's not necessarily a survival.
No, I mean, it could be something along the lines of like, in a weird way, help not save people, but like.
You know what he has? A little bit.
Yeah. What do you got?
He's got a deadline.
For his story.
For his story. But that is an external motivation. It's teed up in the first act. It's at least what sets him on the path initially.
That is true. Yeah. Okay, and that does change as once he starts.
I'm going to write a paper about your book.
Yeah, do it.
That's the other thing, right? Is I don't think authors necessarily need to. I don't think they ever do. Yeah. Like they'll say things like, "Well, what do you think it is?" You know, because they don't want to limit the reader's interpretation of their piece. It's why artists never talk about like what their painting means. It's like you've got to, once again, we talk about art being collaborative, and it's really boring if the artist comes in and says it's about this, the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you said that because it's like, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think like I put that in there. I mean, of course, that's just a thing that, well, this is what he does. It's kind of like I guess it's not really cool. No, you're right. It is a motivation. And like, I was like, to me, the most important, I guess it's because the one I was focused on was his relationship with his father and finding that and his obsession. Yeah. Like that was the thing, because that was the heart of the story that I needed.
But you don't drop it. You continue. Like there's check-ins from his editor. How is this coming along?
Well, so it's also,
I don't think it's like nobody's going to be like, oh my God, when's he going to get this article done? But it does set him on this path of self-discovery and gets him on this path of connecting like with the memory of his father and his childhood. And
it's also, to me, that I think this is the line where motivation and plot kind of ties, because honestly, that whole thing to me was less motivation and more about just allowing this character to be in the areas and do the things he's doing. Right. So, he's so
it's like a vehicle, to getting him
into having him tie to his goal, which is like, his goal is like to find a truth about this signal. But, that's what he wants, once he goes down this path. And I think having him in this position as a journalist for, Science magazine, and, that kind of allows him to kind of go on this investigation, Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that but you're not wrong. Like, I guess that is a motivation for him, he's got a deadline.
Thinking about mine, like in act one, my character's goal, what they think is going to make their life. And I can relate to this is I'm going to get into the city and I'm going to go see a punk show. Yeah. Like, because this night is the night and this is it, there's no tomorrow. It's this very naive, childish thing that like, I will have catharsis and this kind of, cathedral, this mass type thing. Yeah. And I'm not thinking about tomorrow because I'm a kid. I'm thinking about this experience right now. And obviously that's not what they need. And that is not the goal for the whole story, but that is what gets them moving into the story. Yeah. That's like her deadline. Like, are we going to go see this show? Is tonight going to be the night, the best night ever?
Yeah, right.
No, there's always tomorrow and it sucks. You're hungover, and then there's the like harsh reality of like, what happened the night before? Oh no.
So it's funny. I'm looking at this. When I was doing some research, pulling up this dabblewriter.com, which we'll share in the notes, whatever. And it's like, I have this great little write-up about like how to build multidimensional character motivations, right? So you have the right motivation and wrong goal, same motivation, conflicting goals, and then shifting motivation. So you shouldn't just have a single one, or you don't have to. You could. You can,
But you should probably have an overarching one that you, the author, knows. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just say there should be some planning. Like the reason why I had multiple, I think, was because of a lack of planning, not because of my nuanced brain or anything. It was like I was weaving characters and I was having them do things to make sure they got to the next event before they got to the next action scene or horror scene or claustrophobic scene. And how I got them there was in contrast to what their overarching kind of motivation was. And that's what I'm refining now. So, I mean, there still should be planning, but I think it can be nuanced.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's writing. So, yeah, it's funny because like all of mine, like now thinking about all the other characters here too, like Lilo definitely has multiple now I'm thinking about it, but like for each one, I just had one in mind. Like that was like the overpowering one.
But I think that's why reading's fun, right? It is not just one note. I mean, and if it is, it's kind of boring.
Yeah, it's true.
Like the last book that I threw across the room in anger, and I won't share what it was because
Host by Russ
anybody who finished the book. It was starts with R and ends with a paso.
And a paso.
There was one. It was like it was trying to be edgy, and it was like it just reminded me of something. My first attempt at a book that I tried to write when I was in my 20s. It reminded me of that, where it was like needlessly edgy and needlessly violent. The characters' motivation and goal was so one note that it was just like tepid. And I kept waiting for something. I was like, oh, maybe they're building towards like a twist or reveal or something. And it was just so flat and so boring. So that's all to say that having nuanced characters is good as long as you plan. This should be good for you, right? Because you're like on the cusp of teeing up another book.
This is great for me because
now the Host is out and you can order that on Amazon.com or Barnes and Noble,
wherever you'd like. Yeah, no, this is great because my brain is now getting back into this. Clearly, it's a little rusty on it, so I need to get back into it, and it's good. Now I'm thinking about all the characters I have, and like I said, I'm just excited to kind of breathe some more life into some of my antagonists. And I have some. Again, I really like playing with those. I like playing with those neutral characters, and having them turn or have them be good and like having that pull. So,
what's coming to mind right now, and if I talk about him too much, I'm sorry, but I watch a whole bunch of like interviews with Tarantino sometimes, just to see, like, because I kind of respect him as a writer. He'd mentioned Reservoir Dogs when he was filming or writing it. I forget who it was. That it was like, did you do the subtext work on Reservoir Dogs? And he was like, oh, I don't think I did the subtext work on that. And then through like examining his own script, he realized that, it's about, these bank robbers and a heist gone wrong. But beneath the surface, it really is like a father-son story between Tim Roth's character and Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
And then he got to he's like, so it's nice to know that I had some subtext going on and some kind of intrinsic internal motivations, but I never want to do that again. He was like, it's nice to know that I have that going on in my writing, but he doesn't want to intentionally put it there. And he was like, I think that is for the audience to discover and uncover. And yes, it was kind of reaffirming that I have that going on, but he doesn't want to operate on that level, which is really interesting, right? I mean, I feel like I operate on that level maybe to a fault. Like, can you just tell a story with just the external motivation and then hope that characters get, or that your readers get, different internal motivations from your characters? Kind of like,
I guess you don't have to necessarily like plot those things out, and you can infer what they are between the actions and the scenes between the characters, right?
Because there's so many configurations, and our story as humans is so rote. No offense, but like we all have similar touch points. We're all going to interpret things, through our own life lens and that, like, our own experiences. But the overarching stories of our lives are familial, work, money, power, sickness.
I'm excited to get to work. So what have you been reading, watching?
So I picked up this really interesting book. It's called Host by Russ Capasso.
Oh my God, what a shill. You son of a bitch. This is a volleyball match of shilling.
Yeah.
Listener,
I start reading your book again, man. I'll tell you what, it is so much stronger than the beta I read.
Thank you.
You have done so much like work on it. It's got such a sense of place, and
thanks, man.
That was not present in the beta. And I still thought the beta was good. I just feel like your writing has just really improved significantly through this entire process. So kudos.
Anything in particular that stood out to you that changed? I think the whole opening was new, right?
Whole opening's new. Like, yeah. So like your prologue, I guess it's your chapter 1, but it feels like a prologue.
Yep.
That's completely new, and that kind of time jump. And then really like what's standing out now, and I'm not far in, right? I'm only like 40 pages in but just, it has so much more of a sense of place than it did before. You've added a lot of like descriptive details through kind of Elliot's POV that feel like you feel like you're going through, the old magazines and, these boxes. It was just really, it was nice. It didn't feel like this amorphous character floating through an amorphous space. It captures a moment like this nice kind of Polaroid. So
awesome.
Kudos.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
I also opened up White Noise again. Like when I was in my 20s, it was one of my favorite books, and I haven't read it in a long time. And geez, it's good. It's like this kind of, it's by DeLillo. It's like this postmodern story about a professor and his family. And I do think a lot of my writing, I'm not like the wordsmith that DeLillo is, but I do think a lot of my writing influenced by him. He has such this like critique about like consumerism and like American ideals and, happiness. And when I look at the first act of my book, I'm like, was I trying to do this? Like, was I subconsciously trying to do this?
Yeah.
Now I haven't read the book since I was like 19 or 20. So it's been a lot of years, but back then I'd read it a couple times. But yeah, just a really good book. And as far as watching, did the Oppenheimer, saw it in 70 millimeter, traveled a little extra far to see it on film.
Great movie,
which was
too
a mistake.
Long. That's disappointing because I mean, my viewing was good. It was nice.
Yeah,
it was loud.
I say it wasn't a mistake because of the movie. I think the movie was phenomenal, and I think it's wonderful that Nolan shot it on film. It's just that the AMC that I went to, the print was scratched really badly.
Really?
Like it wasn't just like one mark. There was like 6 different black lines that were through all of it. And eventually, my brain learned to ignore it. But then my brain got a reminder maybe about every 30 or 40 minutes. And I don't know enough about film to know whether it was real change happening or if it was all in one film. But whatever was happening, about every 30 to 45 minutes, the sound would drop out abruptly for about 3 to 5 seconds.
Really?
And the whole audience would go, "Oh,
really? That's bad."
And then
that's really bad.
Suspension of disbelief gone, and then all of a sudden I'm noticing the scratches again because I'm back in the medium,
back in the real world.
As much as I love that Nolan shot on film, I just don't feel like, at least the theater that I went to, they're not ready to screen film.
Yeah,
still like there's not enough care being taken. I don't think there's anybody in the booth. I think it was automated. It's just easier for them to, turn on a scheduled computer and project digital. Because I think if I had gone to like an IMAX digital presentation of Oppenheimer, I wouldn't have had any of those complaints, which sucks because I was really excited to go see this on film. It's been forever since I've seen a movie projected on film, but still a great movie.
Agreed.
I love that he had to make, I believe, because he was shot some of it on 70 mil and he shot some of it on 70 millimeter IMAX. And I think he shot some of it on 70 millimeter IMAX black and white, which is a film stock that's never existed before.
Really?
So they had to like make
this
for film stock, which is like so cool.
That's
to me,
really awesome.
Like so interesting.
Yeah. That's what you get when you're Christopher Nolan, I guess.
That's what you get. How about you? What are you reading? What are you watching?
I don't think I finished anything since the last time. I was still working through this book, Shards of Honor. I'll probably finish it today. Lois McMaster Bujold. It's a fun like space sci-fi thing from the 80s. I'm enjoying it. But that's it for the reading side. I haven't really read much else. Watching, I think I saw a movie the other day here at home, and I don't remember what it was. So it probably wasn't that good.
Oh no.
Yeah. Or maybe it was a movie for the other podcast. I don't know. So it was really bad. I don't remember.
Well, that's intentional because you're intentionally watching bad movies.
But then I looked at my calendar. I was like, because I'm a calendar you know me, I'm spreadsheets and calendars, right? And I was like, I usually like block off time. So like, just don't bother me. I'm going to watch a movie or something or whatever. I'm just going to do this thing. Or just so I can also remember that I watched it. But I've actually realized I was playing video games all week.
Oh, really? Well, what are you playing?
It's kind of nice. I haven't played video games in so long. I restarted Fallout 4.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's the Boston one, right?
Yeah. I had only gotten through it like maybe a third of the way through it, maybe.
It's a good game.
Yeah, on PlayStation 4. And then I picked it up on PC and I've just been playing on a laptop for like the last couple nights, which has been a lot of fun. cruising on that.
I remember playing that and trying to go to where my house would be.
Yeah, it's not.
And it's just an empty field with a bunch of giant scorpions.
Yeah, and the map of like Boston to Concord and Arlington are like so crammed close together. Yeah. It's just like, you can't walk from Concord to, I mean, you could, but it's going to take you a long time.
A little longer, yeah. That's a good game.
But that, and I've been playing this Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. It's a Metroidvania.
Oh, you really? You've been playing? That's like a kind of Metroidvania type of
side scroller. It's fun.
Side scroller.
It's a fun one. I'm enjoying that. So, but yeah, that's been it. Kind of just took it easy last week. 2 weeks. I've been, I don't know, launching a book, Tim. I don't know if you heard, but
oh, I don't know. You launched a book?
That's it. We're done shilling it.
We have so many copies in the house, dude. I got 2 behind me.
So
Jill just bought 3 of them. We're handing them out like candy down here.
When you're like work Zooms, they're just in the background.
They are. They're literally. Can you see them?
Yep, I can see one.
That's the hardcover. I'm gonna bring that up to get it signed.
That's awesome. I appreciate it, and I'm glad you're enjoying it on the new final read through. So
final. Now I'll read this again.
It's a nice quick beach read, So, all right, I think that's it, right? Are we done here? We're wrapping this up?
I think we're done. What do we got next?
What are we doing next? We're doing
writer's block, I think.
Yeah, which hopefully I won't be in by the time we start that episode.
I think, well, we've gone through it. So
yeah, we both
I'm sure there's varying degrees, but hopefully we can provide some tools and tips to get through it.
I think I
drink a lot. That's it. Just
water.
on through.
Drink a lot of water.
Hydrate.
I would like to cue that conversation up a bit. I think I ran into, and I'm going to think about this going back to writing host and everything on that over the last couple of years. I think I ran into writer's block more during the revision process. And I think that's because I didn't know what I was doing.
Interesting.
I think because I remember writing the first draft and I was just cranking. I got that done.
Well, it was first person, right? So
yeah, it wasn't good, but I did do it. It started at middle and end, but it was the revision process that went downhill. But
yeah, I can identify with that. We can talk about it next week. But similarly, where I just kind of like barfed out a first draft.
Yeah.
And then I was like, none of this makes sense. Just gotta fix this.
All right, so that's our episode. If you enjoyed the episode and you know someone who would too, you should let them know. You can follow us on Instagram at Writer Syndrome Books. We're on, I'm not calling it X, we're on Twitter at writer_syndrome. I refuse to call it X. It's so stupid.
Oh my God, it's so lame.
Are we on the other one, Threads, yet?
We're on the Threads, but I mean, since
it's a different animal,
we don't have much on there.
Yeah. Instagram is probably the way to go. But you can find all our episodes and contact info if you have any ideas or feedback, topic ideas, or if you're an author out there and you want to chat with us, hit us up.
Yeah, always looking for authors to talk about what you're working on, what you published.
Yeah.
So hit us up. We'd love to have you on.
Absolutely. You can find all that at writersyndrome.com.